The history of the Route 1 is really a history of southeast Fairfax County. It started as an Indian path in the 1600s, and as the colonial settlers moved north from Jamestown and Northern Neck, they followed that path to the north. And they used it as sort of the center of their activity. It served the plantations along the Potomac River, but subsequent settlers built their homes and their churches and later their schools along the Potomac Path. All this is the predecessors of Route 1. The Potomac Path was home, or the way to get home, for Virginia's first families. Whether they had business in Williamsburg or other places, they would use the Potomac Path as their primary overland route. The Fairfax family, Lord Fairfax and his cousins, the George Masons that lived in Mason Neck, and of course the Washingtons. So the Potomac Path, which is now Route 1, was really formed a central part of the first family's histories. During the Revolutionary War, the French assisted Washington and his army. And one of the critical points was when General Rochambeau and General Washington rode with their armies south to their destinies at the Battle of Yorktown, and they took the Potomac Path. Washington and his other neighbors gradually built a road north from Gum Springs. It was called the Mount Vernon Road, and it intersected the Kings Highway, which was the primary north-south route, at an area we call Pendall right now. Route 1, at least in its earlier versions, was central to one of the biggest cultural developments in the area, and that was in the 1840s when a group of Quaker families moved down from New Jersey and Philadelphia. Two of them bought Woodlawn and the surrounding 2,000 acres primarily for the timber, which they sent back up to the Philadelphia shipyards. Other families moved in and they undertook to recreate or reinvigorate the agricultural industry in the area. Another enterprise of the Quakers was building a road, the Alexandria to Accotink turnpike in 1856. And the name comes from the practice of having a log that was hinged that would close the road. They would close the pike and let the people, when they were ready for people to use the road, they would open the pike and turn it, if you will, from one side to another. And that's where the name came from. But it ran down old Fort Hunt Road to Sherwood Hall Lane and over to Gum Springs and Route 1 and south. And when they built it, they took out some of the curves from the old Potomac Path. But it was an important piece of communications or line of communication for businesses in the area. Shortly before World War I, the Army bought the land down at, which is now Fort Belvoir, and called it Camp Humphreys. And a huge influx of people and activity during the war, World War I, caused the Accotink Turnpike to turn to mud. And so the Army paved it with concrete in 1918. And it served as the primary two-lane road for automobiles and trucks between Alexandria and Camp Humphreys. After World War I, there were a number of developments in the commercial activities along Route 1, and one of the most surprising was airports. The biggest one was in Hybla Valley. It was called the George Washington Air Junction. And it, in the 50s, almost competed with Dulles to be a large airport outside downtown Washington area. It ultimately closed, although it was a naval training, a flight training facility in World War II, and is now Huntley Meadows Park. And for you residents that wonder why that street is named Lockheed Boulevard, it's because it ran from Route 1 over to the Lockheed hangars at the airfield. The second field is Beacon Field, which opened in the 1930s, and it was located at the current Beacon Mall. And it was also used for flight training in World War II and closed in 1959 when they started to build houses up there. There are a number of remnants of the Potomac Path left if you know where they are and take a moment to find them. Buckman Road is one. It is parallel to Route 1 south of Gum Springs. And that's the original Potomac Path route that travelers used moving north and south. Another one is Old Mill Road from Lucan's Lane down past the driving range at Mount Vernon Country Club. That's the original Potomac Path. Another one is the driveway at Woodlawn Stables that juts off from Route 1. That's the original concrete that the Army laid in 1918. And the largest, longest remnant of the Potomac Path is Old Colchester Road, which runs from Pohick Church on Route 1 down to the Occoquan River. That is where the Indians walked. If you want to walk in the pathway, in the footsteps of the Dogue Indians, walk that road. If you're going to drive it, you're going to drive it in following George Washington's carriage. It's the original path, and it's just about as wide as it was back in his time. Route 1 tells the history of the area that we live in. The trouble is most people don't know that history.